Welcome to Voices of Change, leaders of the new customer experience. Listen to the experts who are leading this transformation.
Welcome to a new episode of the Xtendo Group BPO podcast, Voices of Change, leaders of the new customer experience. In today's episode, we're honored to have Matt Clare, who currently serves as the Vice President of Fraud and 3D Secure Operations at Thredd, a leading provider of technology solutions to the payment industry. With an extensive background in developing fraud mitigation strategies and secure payment solutions, Matt has been a key player in protecting financial transactions across multiple global platforms. His expertise ranges from implementing advanced technology to managing critical operations that ensure trust and security for users in the digital realm. In this conversation, Matt will share his perspectives on the challenges and opportunities facing the financial sector in improving customer experience. Additionally, we will delve into how innovation in financial security and technology is transforming bank-client interactions to offer safer and more efficient solutions. Matt, it's a pleasure to have you with us to discuss how security and customer experience intertwine in today's financial context. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I'm just going to jump straight into the questions because I know the listeners are very interested in your point of view in these very challenging times in terms of ever-changing technology and experiences, and especially how dynamic customers can be in today's market. So, if you don't mind, I just want to start with, what is the main goal of customer experience in the payment sector, and how can it really be optimized without compromising security?
So, as a card holder, most people want to be able to, a card holder or an account holder, most people want to be able to pay seamlessly without lots of friction. They don't want to have to keep entering codes and keep getting lots of questions and keep confirming and reconfirming. But they also want their money to be safe. They don't want their privacy. They don't want their privacy invaded. People seeing what is being spent and where, for example, or fraud being committed. Because while in many cases there is regulation and there are protections so that the card holder or the account holder is not financially suffering from fraud, it's still traumatic for people because they still feel like they've been robbed until such time as the bank or card issuer says, it's okay, we know this wasn't you, here's a refund. And that can be done in a number of ways. One of the ways I think, which is the most effective, and Thredd has been very effective in supporting this, is putting controls in the card holder or the account holder's hands. So you'll see with challenger banks like Curve in the UK, like Revolut, who was a client of Thredd's, that you can freeze your card, which is now available pretty much everywhere. You can block gambling. You can take action with what we call point of sale mode. A point of sale mode is how you use your card. So it could be contactless. Some places still allow the use of magnetic stripe. It could be chip and pin. And clearly, magnetic stripe with a signature, contactless, are higher risk. Some card holders like myself will block them. That way, if anyone were to get hold of my card, they can't transact with those low risk options. Other people may use that and they may wish to leave them open, or they may be traveling to areas where those options of payment are widely used. So I think giving controls to the card holder so they themselves are in command of the friction to a degree. Customer education is very important. We have had big problems in the UK. The UK is a very cashless economy, but it's also an economy where a lot of fraud happens. And we've got a new regulation in where if I were to fall victim, or you were to fall victim of a scammer, which could be someone selling a car on social media that doesn't exist, and it's a great deal, but you've got to pay now because somebody else is coming to get it. And if you don't give me 5,000 euros or dollars or whatever now, someone else will get it. We send the money and the car doesn't exist. That happens far more often than you would expect. What now happens is the banks in the UK, if that kind of fraud occurs, not just that kind of fraud, by the way, but if what we call authorized push payment fraud occurs, the bank of the payee and the recipient, the bank of the payer and the recipient both split that liability 50-50, up to £85,000. So pretty much $110,000. So banks are now being very careful, and they're saying, are you sure this is fraud? Do you know this payee? Have you checked this? Have you checked that? Don't buy goods if you haven't seen them. And that's good education, but for some people that's too much friction. And they're yes. And they find that frustrating. So they might move to an organization who's perhaps got better security, better verification, but there's less friction. So I think in summary, minimal friction, give cardholders as much choice as possible, but encourage them to lock their accounts down for their own protection, but also educate. There's another service which is available here in the UK where we've had many cases where somebody purporting to be the bank will call a vulnerable customer and they'll say, "It's your bank here. Can you give me you're going to get a one-time passcode. Can you tell me that? I need it so that I can verify you." And then they'll commit fraud. Or they'll say, "We're sending a taxi round to pick up your card because there's a problem with the chip." And because people who don't work in the industry may not fully understand that, they'll take the word for it. So there's a service in the UK where you can dial 159 and actually be put through to your bank. You can say, "I want to speak to Barclays or Citibank or whatever," and it will put you through. Some banks also have an option in their app which says, "Yes, we are on the phone to you," or "No, we're not on the phone to you." If someone says they're on the phone to you, hang up. It's fraud. It's an ongoing battle. The fraudsters are always coming up with new ways.
Yeah, it would seem so. But it's very interesting to hear that challenger banks are offering a more flexible approach to especially freezing your cards and making sure that you're a bit more protected. Maybe it's time the traditional banks catch up to this trend as well and try to make it simpler for the user.
Yeah, very much so, because some people, like I'm not judging people who gamble. I don't gamble. I don't actually use a physical card. I have a physical card mainly for demonstration purposes. I'm training, but I use Apple Pay all the time. Some people will use Google Pay or others because it's so safe, because it's biometric. I can't, unfortunately, persuade my septuagenarian parents to do the same, but I have managed to educate them a bit to some of the fraud risks.
So moving forward, we could say that one of the biggest customer experiences is actually protecting your customer.
Yes.
That's very good. In terms of this, and you mentioned an interesting point there, I'll just jump right into the next topic with that, because what comes to mind when we talk about chatbots, how can we really use them to our advantage to improve customer experience in situations like you mentioned now?
So chatbots can be very, very helpful, but they need to be used in a measured way. There have been too many cases, even since the advent of voice recognition 25 years ago, where they've got very limited use cases. They're set up in a way where the customer's expectation is they'll do everything, or they're a blocker on talking to a real person. So I think for an organization that is looking to use chatbots, they either have to make it that this is a fraud prevention chatbot. This chatbot is to verify if the transaction is you, or this chatbot is to give you your balance or something. Anything else, speak to a person, go to the app. But I think if an organization can do what Klarna's done and build a very rich and very high-performing large language model, and in Klarna's case, I think in 35 languages, then it could be incredibly powerful. Klarna, as you probably know, claimed in March that the chatbot is doing the work of 700 people to the same standard as humans. And I used to look after a 21 language contact center for a major bank. And that had its challenges, having English, French, German speakers right the way through to smaller languages and making sure you have enough people for the peaks and troughs throughout the 24-hour day. It's challenging. So having a 35 language chatbot is potentially game changing, because if you are, I don't know, let's say Lithuania, where only 2.5 million people, Lithuanian isn't a widely spoken language. You're not going to have a team of 60 people if suddenly there's a big fraud issue in Lithuania, or a merchant acquirer outage or some scare. So it's very powerful, but it needs to be continually optimized. There needs to be the option for customers to feedback. The journeys need to be tracked to see where people are falling out, where people are saying, "Yes, you did what I needed. Thank you very much." And also any customer attrition, because there will be people who just say, I can't stand this. I want to speak to a person. Let me out. And that could be because people have got accents that are not recognized by the model, in English and indeed Spanish. The two languages are spoken in a very wide range of countries with a very wide range of accents. Even within the UK, we've probably got more diverse regional accents than the US, even though we're only a sixth of their population. And sometimes voice recognition doesn't understand someone with a very thick, I'm not going to pick on Birmingham, but a very thick Birmingham accent, or, very thick Southeast accent like mine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's definitely a challenge we've seen in our industry as well. As you mentioned, accents and large language models don't really intertwine. You have to be very proper for them to understand you on the first go around. And obviously, it can be a very frustrating experience, especially if you're dealing with financial services, right? So it's something that we try to make work by giving them more examples. You can hire someone from Brum, as they would say, and try to speak to the chatbot for half an hour every day and try to make it a bit simpler. But there's one key aspect here that I think everyone misses with this. Every industry is moving and shifting towards a more AI-driven approach. But for example, could we say that it's really possible to maintain a human touch and a customer-centric approach when you're using AI that much?
I would say that depends very much on the situation, and it depends very much on the customer. I think if the situation is fairly binary, it's yes or no, it's you're approved or you're declined, then there's only so much human you can add to that, even in a human interaction. If you're being declined for a loan, or if your account is locked and for whatever reason you are the genuine customer, but the bank doesn't believe it's you, that is a binary situation. And likewise, the customer's own preferences. So someone might be very utilitarian, like I would consider myself, and just wants to get the thing done and then move on. Other people, they like more chat, they need more empathy and all the rest of it. And they might really like that. Whereas I might say, look, I just want to get this done. Please stop all the flannel. Let me go. So I think it depends. I think if the model can interpret perhaps by the language that person uses, if it's very quick, snappy, then they need to mirror that. If it's more fluffy and warm and nice, then maybe they need to be more literary in their speaking. Maybe they need to be more empathetic, softer, and perhaps even detecting if somebody's first language is not. Again, Klarna, 35 languages, you're probably not going to have that problem. But in a monolingual business, perhaps in the US, the UK, or even in a Spanish language business, it might be that there'll be somebody for whom Spanish isn't a first language, or English, and therefore they'll detect that, so they'll use simpler language. Likewise, jargon. There's a lot of jargon in the financial services industry, and for years I've been saying to colleagues, please explain the acronyms. Please talk to people in plain blue-collar English, not in financialese.
Of course, that's the average user wouldn't really want to hear the financial terms either, right? They just want their problem fixed. It's something that we can see across industries, right? Yeah. If you speak with someone that is deeply into technology, they will speak a foreign language, even if you're sharing.
If I said to you, your transaction was declined because it was a high-risk MCC and the POS mode isn't secure. Exactly. Whereas if I said to you, the transaction was in an area of the economy which is considered high risk, gambling, late night bars or something, and it was with a non-secure use of the card, i.e. contactless or magnetic stripe. That's plain English. Wow.
Yeah, and of course, that's something that we would consider with that, right? It's the AI's lack of human touch sometimes that can be a bit confusing.
Yeah.
So with this, really, we're thinking of a future where we have integrations between AI and we still have human talent to help improve the customer satisfaction. With combined tools, do you really think there's a better approach to this to achieve the end goal of retaining customers and increasing their satisfaction?
I think there is, because the AI will take on a lot of the mid-range, not uber transactional, but slightly more complex, but not once in a million type customer situations. And I think that will, reduce the risks of non-compliance. I think we've all been in situations where a well-meaning customer service agent has said, yes, we can do this, or of course we'll refund you. And actually the person on the other end of the phone may be a customer who's acting in an underhand way. But because we have committed to it, we're then obliged to do something which would not have been necessary. Whereas an AI would say, well, hang on, looking at these factors, this customer's not due a refund. It was clearly fraud, or they'd been negligent, or it was consenting that they sent the paper, whatever it may be. So I think there will be less errors. I think there will be faster service. Again, the scale up that an AI model can do. You remember at the start of COVID when, unfortunately, everyone was suddenly at home, and some businesses were able to convert quickly to home working, others weren't. And some cut back their staffing very quickly, which sadly had impacts for those people's jobs, but also meant that people were having very long waiting times at various businesses, just when they needed reassurance, perhaps with banks where people's income had dried up because of the COVID situation. Or again, it could be that there's a nationwide tech problem or a particular event which is driving up contact volumes. So I think in that respect, AI will help immensely. And I think also it will help for those customers who do need a human touch, because we see this in payments. Many of us would like to see cash reduced, if not eliminated, because cash is, very often most prevalent in areas of the economy where there's money laundering, tax evasion, exploitation. But there are some people in the economy who are completely, honest and all the rest of it. They just don't feel comfortable with technology. So hopefully via the use of AI, it can be made as close to human while remaining secure. I'm thinking of things like behavioral biometric authentication, voice recognition, where even through mimicking somebody, it knows it's really me or it's really you, and not somebody who can do a very good impression of either of us. And that might mean that, for example, our parents or grandparents, they don't have to remember passwords and codes anymore, and it's easier to authenticate.
Exactly. It's a very good point. AI is in a very strong path right now to where we may actually be able to experience a bit of the future sci-fi ideas they had back in the 50s and 60s quite soon, right? Just with biometric scanning, if you would explain that to someone 40 years ago, they would call you crazy. But it's something
there's a James Bond film. I think it's Octopussy with Roger Moore, and there's a chap who his eye is looked at, and that film's from about 1983. And it looks complete sci-fi, whereas of course that's completely normal now.
Exactly. But with this, and taking into consideration the operations Thredd does specifically in such a changing industry with changing protection trends, regulatory affairs, and just compliance, I would say, on a daily basis, right? How do you keep on top of your employees to help them adapt to technological changes?
So at Thredd, we're continually training and developing our colleagues. We've got a very strong training and development function. We've been giving training on AI, been giving training on various aspects of technology, from languages like Python to DevOps to emerging trends within financial services. And we've got a great tech team who demonstrates regularly what they're developing, what our clients are asking for, so that we remain in touch, because as a key enabler for the fintech industry and payments, we absolutely have to stay ahead of the game. In a previous job, I did work with a legacy processor, and it was a hindrance to our growth. And I worked at a legacy card processor 20 years ago, and it was frightening, the lack of flexibility that they had compared to more modern organizations.
That's very good. You have to stay ahead. Simple as that. Is what they say. The lack of innovation is the first thing that will kill a business. So it's something that we see. And of course, why we wanted to speak a bit more deeply with you about your opinions on this topic, because the payments industry per se seems to the end user still a bit archaic, even with all the changes. But it will seem a bit A4. Like there's too many processes, right? That people don't really think about the need for it to be like that. At the end of the day, we're talking about people's money and their transactions. So there's not a lot of room for flexibility and crazy innovation, right? It has to be inside of certain parameters. But with this, you mentioned training in AI models. Would you say there's a tangible value in training with AI models for the future? And how can you really demonstrate it?
You mean training people with AI models?
Yeah.
I think there could be, because actually very often you've got a very complex subject. If I take, for example, without using too much jargon, training up people on how card transactions are cleared, or how a physical card is tokenized to become an Apple Pay card on your phone using technology. Different people will understand different things very clearly, and different people have knowledge gaps. And with remote working, people sometimes lose concentration. There's something that doesn't resonate with them. So I think with AI, there are potentially ways of prompting people. Many of us have used Read AI, where it talks about your engagement score and your charisma score and all the rest of it. That can be used. But also perhaps assessing, I know some people would say this is big brother, big sister, but assessing how somebody works in the day to day and saying, well, you were very quick at this, but you seem to hesitate there, or you didn't seem comfortable on this subject in a call. Here's a quick 10-minute webinar on, the use of automated clearinghouse in the US and all the rules since 2022 or something like that. So I think there's definitely a role for it, but there'll be personal preference. Some people will be great. This can really hunt down the niche, tiny little bits of knowledge I need. Other people will say, oh no, it's too intrusive on me.
Yeah, there will always be a balance, right, between what people accept and what they think is a bit too much. But I think we're advancing, because just a few years ago, people would go crazy with a slight touch of AI in their day-to-day. So now everyone is using ChatGPT, for example, for even the most menial task.
Yeah, there are some banks. I know of a major bank, I won't say which one, but in the Americas, in the northern half of the continent of the Americas, use my words carefully, where apparently use of AI internally is banned. And others embrace it, like we've seen with Clare, and we within Thredd are also starting to embrace it as well. Well, we embrace it, but we're starting to apply it as well. It's going to be transformative.
With that in mind, and your expertise in the industry, Matt, how do you really see the evolution of customer experience in the payment sector changing in the next 10 years with the advancement of AI?
So I think we'll see even more tailored products. I think we've got to be very, very careful, because generalizations can be made based on people's demographics or on where they're spending money or who they bank with, and so forth. And what might be a great choice of product, functions, services, suggestions for person A, person B, who's got exactly the same demographic attributes, may be completely different and actually quite offended by that. So we've got to be careful on that front. But I think it will mean much more tailoring. I think it will mean hopefully much less friction, much less one-time passcodes, much less, did you make this transaction? We think it's fraud. And I think as well, there is an opportunity to really put the fraudsters out of business, but I would temper that and say that AI is also effectively a two-edged sword, because the fraudsters also are using AI. We've heard about the CFO of an organization who was contacted on a Teams call, where the people on the Teams call all look very genuine, and a $25 million transfer was authorized as a result, and that was a deep fake. So we as an industry, and also particularly governments, need to be very, very, and regulators need to be very, very cautious. Again, without strangling AI, they need to make sure that we, if I can call us the good side, are very much on our guard and blocking what I'm going to call the bad side. Because as we know as well, there are states in this world who are already hacking, infrastructure in countries that would rather be peaceful. And those same state actors will develop AI models which will try and create absolute chaos. There is also a scenario where AI looks to exploit not just fraud-related weaknesses in a business, but legal or regulatory-related weaknesses in a business, and then hammers that business generating complaints or lawsuits, which could put that business out of operation. And that, of course, okay, the business that is would be put out of operation needs to have been compliant. But if that was widespread, we could see a real reduction in competition, which would be a bad thing. We could even see, one competitor trying to put another out of business, which would not be good for consumer choice. But hopefully, better tailoring, much faster service, because some people feel that since we've gone online with apps and websites, we spend so much time in our phones updating this, cancelling that, and it takes too much of our time. So hopefully AI will enable us to reduce all of those digital interactions that we do today.
Yeah, hopefully we can look to a future where we have a small hall that just helps us in a more fluent way. Hey, I want to cancel my Netflix, and it will just do it for you. It's a future that may be coming. No offense to Netflix, obviously, just an example. But considering everything we've discussed up to now, what advice would you give to companies, regardless of their industry currently, that are looking to redesign operational processes to really put the customer at the center, without, of course, compromising on the operational efficiency?
I think the most basic thing is to look at where customers are interacting. What's the Pareto of reasons for a customer contacting you? Can they be automated? Can self-service deal with those? Can just a simple thing like better information reduce some of those interactions? And some of the business, smaller business may not be able to go for the big wins. It might be more viable to go for 10 small wins because it's just a question of putting more information on an app or a website than the big thing that will reduce call or contact volumes by 10%. But I would say that's the key thing, because no customer wants to call customer service or wants to get involved in a chatbot. They'd rather just click and do things themselves. Save, of course, if the customer base is of a demographic that doesn't use apps, in which case then, that's the demographic, that's the business model. You're stuck with that for those customers. I think as well, looking at reasons for attrition, reasons for complaints. Every business will have trends in those. It could be, I was refused credit. It could be, I spent 10 minutes trying to get through to you to talk to you about this because I can't do it in your app. And again, there'll be a Pareto. There'll be some complaints that stand out very starkly because they were bad, but they may not be high volume. And there'll be others that are low level things that that's not serious, but it's a high volume of complaints and dissatisfaction. So I think that's really important to give as much information and as much functionality as simply as possible to customers in plain language, be that English, Spanish, whichever language, not using jargon. I helped my mum with some banking tasks the other week, and she was with a legacy bank, much to my chagrin. But she feels safer there. And some of the things we wanted to do, I couldn't find. And actually, they were there. It was just buried in, menus and jargon that was not easy to find, even for me versus my mum, who's a little bit older than I am.
Yeah. It's, of course, something, like you mentioned earlier, speaking plainly to the customer. But that means, of course, everything from UX and UI design to how it's laid out for them, right? It feels sometimes that companies forget their demographic is really people from 18 to 90. So working on the end scale of the demographic is equally as important.
Exactly.
It's something that I think people forget quite regularly.
True. And you remind me of when COVID started. One of the things we did is I led a couple of webinars very early on because we knew that a number of groups would be disproportionately affected by COVID. And that included people who were highly vulnerable clinically, so they had to stay in their homes, and people who were very old who were also clinically vulnerable, but couldn't go to the supermarkets. And how do you allow a 90-year-old who doesn't use technology to give the means for a carer that they don't know or a council volunteer to take payment for their shopping when they're not online and they can't use them? Well, the obvious thing was a connected card with payment limits and where you can spend it limits. So you can only spend it at a supermarket or a pharmacy within a 3-kilometer radius. You can only spend between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Or you allow the daughter, the brother, the carer, whatever, who lives 50 kilometers away and can't visit because of COVID restrictions. So there are ways we can support pretty much any usage case to keep even those people who will not touch technology ever safe. There was also, while I worked for a major bank, something in the UK called Simple Payment Services, which was the disbursement of government benefits to people who were quite vulnerable and had challenges using technology. And that worked pretty well also.
It's very important, I think, to maintain the humanity of customer experience moving forward and return to a bit more of a customer centricity. I think it's a point that has slowly moved away for many businesses, but at the end of the day, it's as important as anything else in a bottom line, in my own opinion, of course.
No, I agree.
Just as a small bonus track, Matt, and this is a bit out of the blue for you, but in the last weeks, months, is there a book, a podcast, or any resource that has inspired you recently to just share with the world so we can all look into it?
So in the industry, some of the 11FS podcasts are very interesting because they bring some good leaders from within the within the fintech industry from around the world. And they have some good panelists. Those are quite good. I've listened to a couple of good AI books as well, one by Mustafa Suleyman called The Coming Wave. And despite him having played a very, very key role in the development of AI, he's also got some healthy skepticism. And he's very measured about it. And for him, it's very much a human-centric view. So that I would recommend to anyone who is interested in AI. It's not going to teach you more necessarily about how AI works, but it's useful to see some of the risks. Of course, we as individuals or one company or one government is not going to be able to decisively influence the way AI works in the world or within an industry. But as individuals, it's important that we prepare. And I think those people who are not prepared and those businesses or countries that are not prepared are potentially either going to find themselves exposed economically to competitive threats, or perhaps even not prepared in the event of a hostile actor starting to, for example, interfere in elections or create havoc in public sector services or even in the banking industry. So I think it's important that people look at different viewpoints from AI. It clearly has massive, wonderful potential to automate, to do all the simple tasks and allow humans to focus on deep work and the higher value added. But we've got to remain vigilant, to AI having unintended consequences, what people call AI hallucinations, where it does things which are discriminatory or just comes up with really awful outcomes, but also AI in the hands of bad actors.
That's a very good point, and really how we move ahead with that is going to be, I think it's a regulatory inferno for the people working on that topic and how to secure the world from the negative aspects of AI, right?
You're right. And so far, I think there's only the EU that has draft regulation. There's talk of it in India and Brazil as well. Spain has actually got an office. It's not quite a regulator, but it's sort of to keep an eye on how AI operates within Spain. The UK is also looking at what we might do now that we are outside of the EU. And our former Prime Minister, as you know, Rishi Sunak, he held an AI summit, and the new government is also very committed to making AI work for the people of this country.
It's very interesting. And hopefully we can see a future where AI really combines into our daily lives and really starts helping us to make interactions as seamless as possible. Every aspect of life, right? Not everyone enjoys ordering a pizza. Hopefully AI can do it for them and just get the driver there safely as well.
Yes.
With this, Matt, I want to thank you very much for your time today. Your insight on this topic has been truly a gift, and just getting to pick your mind a bit with these questions. I think our listeners will love your point of view, and more than anything, some of your opinions in terms of the future of AI are really thrilling. They're excellent, and they leave me thinking on how we move ahead with AI personally. I also want to give a thanks to our listeners. And of course, as usual, we invite you to follow us on our platforms. We're present currently everywhere. So you'll find us wherever you listen to podcasts. And check our social media links in the following days. You'll get to see some clips of Matt and I just delving a bit more in depth into the topics. See you in the next episode, guys. And again, thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Voices of Change, leaders of the new customer experience. For more information, visit Xtendo.biz and stay tuned to discover more about what's new in customer experience.